if you don't have someone who's got the right qualifications and who's had the right experience and gets the right supervision from a more senior practitioner, you could be sitting with someone who's literally throwing darts at the dartboard in the dark, hoping they'll hit. And often, people are desperate and they'll just take it. Okay, whatever my therapist tells me, I'll do that. And you might just be getting a very narrow range.
I'm your host, Nick Brax, and this is Move Your Mind, where we have raw conversations with the world's leading minds to uncover the hidden struggles behind their success and the mindset it takes to become the best version of yourself. This conversation will change how you see therapy. You'll learn why the system might be sending you the wrong kind of help and what it actually takes to find a therapist who genuinely meets your needs. Nigel, thank you so much, mate, for making the time to come and have this conversation.
G'day, Nick. Great to be here. Really appreciate you making the time to have this conversation.
Well, same here. And I love the work that you are doing. So much in common, so much I want to break down, probably too much to be able to, fit into one podcast episode, but we'll see how we go. So to begin with, can you just give a bit of a background on yourself and what you do so our listeners can learn a little bit more about you?
Okay, so my name's Nigel Pollak. I'm a counsellor, a registered clinical counsellor, and currently president of the Psychotherapy and Counselling Federation of Australia, which is PACFA, P-A-C-F-A for short. So PACFA is the leading peak body for tertiary educated, higher education qualified counsellors in Australia. We represent anyone who has a degree or a master's degree in counselling or psychotherapy, and we have a register that then validates and verifies the credentials and qualifications of those counsellors and psychotherapists. And our goal is to ensure that psychotherapy and counselling and psychotherapists and counsellors have the credibility and the status and the validity that they deserve in Australia, because we believe that Australians are missing out on really excellent mental health care because most Australians don't really know about psychotherapy and counselling and don't realise that psychology is not counselling and psychology is not psychotherapy, that it's actually a completely different and distinct profession which has a very, very valuable place in our society, but a very different role to the role that counsellors and psychotherapists can be playing and should be playing in Australian society.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. We don't really get educated on that. And you hear these different terms and know they mean something else, but you don't really know what it is and what it isn't. And, the same as like, what's a therapist versus a psychologist, or, psychotherapist, a counsellor, what are they? So it's very confusing. And a lot of the time people, it's hard enough just going and asking for help, but then knowing where to go, what category, within that category, what to find. It can be so overwhelming for people, let alone the difficulty in actually being able to then get a session with the person that you're trying to get in touch with.
Absolutely. Would you like me to talk through that? Would you like me to sort of talk your audience through what those different similarities and differences are between those different professional groups, and the lay of the land in Australia, and also a little bit of the lay of the land internationally, because it's not consistent across the board?
Yeah, please. I think it'd be very helpful.
Okay. So normally I would start at what I would call the top of the tree, and the top of the tree is the top of the medical tree in mental health. So we're specifically talking about mental health here, and even that language of mental health is not. It's a little bit controversial, but particularly for counsellors and psychotherapists, and I'll go on to talk about why this language of mental health is a little bit controversial for us. But the language of mental health and mental illness actually primarily came from psychiatry, and psychiatry is a medicine. It's a specialty of medicine, and if you the only way to get referred to a psychiatrist in Australia is through a general practitioner, your GP. And your GP will do a rough assessment, a very basic assessment of your mental health and wellness, essentially looking for mental illness. And the American Psychiatric Association has developed a diagnostic and statistical manual. There's actually two of these manuals that set out the different kinds of mental illness in the world. One is a European, more of a European standard, and the diagnostic and statistical manual we're currently up to version 5 is the Australian version. And these set out criteria for how to diagnose a mental illness or an abnormality or a disorder. So it's a manual of disorders. And that's where psychiatrists really specialize. They are experts in how to read symptoms. You tell the psychiatrist your symptoms. Sometimes you'll get other people to talk about the symptoms that they've observed in you. Recently, I went seeking attention ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD, diagnosis for one of my children, and that we've had to follow this process. We go to the GP, referral to the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist then wanted reports from us, reports from teachers, and then based upon the symptoms that were observed and described by the individual, they then decide which category of disorder that you fit into. Based upon the category of disorder that you fit into, that then helps pharmaceutical companies to then develop medications that can then be designed to treat people who have been determined to fit into each of those diagnostic categories. So that's your psychiatrist, primarily there to provide a conduit between pharmaceutical companies and the individual patient, and to determine what's the best medication for the individual. Under the psychiatrist, you could put a clinical psychologist. So clinical psychologists are also extremely well versed in this diagnostic and statistical manual, and can provide treatment, and often also have a very good understanding of the medications that are prescribed, and can be very helpful in understanding particularly the extreme end of mental illness. Psychologists are more broadly trained. So a clinical psychologist is a specialty of psychology. We have about 25,000 psychologists in the country, and a much smaller number of clinical psychologists. Psychologists also come from a scientific model. They're known as, they know themselves, they describe themselves as scientist practitioners. So once again, they're very interested in the science. What does the science say about specifically behavior? Because we can't really measure much else. So science requires measurement. Science measures psychology is the measure of behavior, and then the assessment of behavior, and then the treatment of behaviors that are somehow seen as dysfunctional or problematic for the individual or for the community in which they inhabit. Another form of psychologist is a counselling psychologist. So of the 25,000 psychologists in Australia, there's just 800 specialist counselling psychologists in the country. At PACFA, we represent psychotherapists and counsellors. So more broadly, psychotherapists and counsellors and at PACFA, actually, they're all trained as counsellors, and then psychotherapy is a specialty. It's seen as a specialty of counselling. Psychotherapists and counsellors describe ourselves as reflective practitioners. And so rather than doing what you might see a psychologist do, and a psychiatrist doing, which is doing an outside-in, looking at you from the outside, looking at your behaviours, hearing about your symptoms, making a diagnosis, and then treating you based on that diagnosis as the expert. So that's an expert model, just like going to your GP is going to an expert, and the expert will tell you what you should do and what treatment, what's the best treatment for the symptoms that you've got. A psychotherapist or counsellor is trying to go on a journey with you. They're trying to engage you in a conversation in which they're not the expert, you're the expert. And you're the expert because you're the only person who has ever lived in your body with your parents at this particular point in history. And so there's never, ever been anyone like you. So rather than trying to create a graph with a norm and a standard deviation to understand what the distribution of disorders is across the population, counsellors and psychotherapists are just purely concerned with the individual that's in front of them, and act and treat that individual as if they are completely unique, and that the only expert in the life of a client for a counsellor or psychotherapist is that client themselves. So counsellors and psychotherapists are experts in process. That we will facilitate a process, and some of the language that you hear in counselling and psychotherapy is language around a process in which you are supported to become more and more yourself, a process in which you are supported to discover the different aspects of yourself and how they might best work for you in the world. There are a huge number of different theories. There's at least 500 plus different kinds of theories and models around psychotherapy and counselling. Some of them come out of philosophy, some of them come out of spirituality, and some of them come out of psychology. Some of the most common ones that people might know about that have come out of psychology, they tend to have, I joke that they're the three LAs. They tend to have 3-letter acronyms. And so people might have heard of DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy, CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, internal family systems, IFS, ACT, ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. And one that's becoming really popular at the moment is EMDR, eye movement desensitization reintegration therapy. So these are psychological models that have come into psychotherapy and counselling. And what I love about psychotherapy and counselling is that we're happy to embrace it all. So if psychology is developing great models, if psychiatry is developing great models, then we want to adopt and embrace those models and integrate them into our practice. So some of the language that you'll hear from psychotherapists and counsellors is about being integrative. We integrate a lot of different possibilities and approaches. We are happy to learn from the scientists. Neuroscience was a really exciting. Neuroscience is very recent. Like, we have only been recently able to look at what's happening in the brain, and even then still roughly. But that's really exciting for counsellors. We want to know what's happening as you're engaging in the process of change, and as you're engaging in the process of interacting with another human being in a relationship, like you would be in a counselling or psychotherapy relationship.
Yeah. Well, thank you for the explanation. But I mean, do people, what's the percentage of people seeking psychotherapy and counselling in Australia?
No, because we don't have a good measure of it. We have a better measure of what's happening in psychology because we've got this. So the GP in Australia is referred to as the gateway to the health system. So in order to get health treatment in Australia, you go through the GP. That's your gateway. And because in about 1996, the government, in its wisdom, set up the Better Access to Mental Health Care system and essentially gave that to psychologists. And psychologists were the only profession that was able to access these Medicare rebates. Nowadays, people might hear about a mental health care plan. So when you get a mental health care plan, pretty much there's a couple of exceptions. There's mental health social workers, there's mental health occupational therapists, but primarily these referrals go to psychologists, and you get 10 sessions with a rebate. So what's happened in the last 25 to 30 years, unfortunately, I think, is that psychology has become synonymous with counselling. And so nowadays in Australia, so it's a quirk of history. Nowadays in Australia, when people think of counselling, they think of psychologists. And when they feel that they're feeling sad, they're feeling depressed, they're feeling anxious, something else is going on with them psychologically, they go to their GP, and their GP refers them to a psychologist. They get a mental health care plan. So people sort of have assumed that that's the right pathway, that's the best pathway, because that's what the government and that's what the medical profession is directing them towards. We don't actually know the numbers. There are approximately a similar number of counsellors as there are psychologists in Australia. At the moment, maybe slightly less. I recently heard the president of the American Counselling Association talk about there being actually 4 times more counsellors in the USA than there are psychologists. So he said there's about 250,000 psychologists in the US, and there's about 1 million counsellors. So in the US, as by way of example, counsellors are much better known than they are in Australia. Similarly, our other English-speaking cousins in the UK, counselling and psychotherapy is very much part of their national health service in a way that it isn't here in Australia. So in a sense, Australia is coming from behind in comparison to the rest of the developed world and Western world in sort of bringing counselling and psychotherapy to the fore. And hopefully we're catching up for the first time in Australia's history. In the last couple of years, the Australian government has started to take notice of psychotherapy and counselling. One of the really exciting things that has just happened is in the last few weeks, the government has published national standards for counsellors and psychotherapists. So we can now, but this is probably one of the things that's been holding this profession back, is that we haven't had a clear, consistent standard. So government, industry, and the consumers haven't known exactly what a counsellor is. There's a concept known as a protected title. So solicitors, barristers, accountants, certain kinds of engineers, psychologists, all the medical profession, all of their physiotherapists, a lot of these professions, their titles are protected legally. So if you call yourself, if I was to call myself a psychologist, I've got a psychology degree, but I haven't registered as a psychologist with the Allied Health Professions Registration Regulation Agency, AHPRA. So if I call myself a psychologist, or if you were to call me a psychologist and I would let your audience think that, I would be breaking the law. But at present, anyone in the country can call themselves a counsellor, psychotherapist, they can call themselves a life coach, things like that. And so it's hard to know the standard. There's no clear way of knowing that you're actually getting a well-trained quality service unless you have that inclination to sort of do a background check and say, hey, are you registered with a professional body, which I would like to go on to talk about, because that's what's key for people to know what they're getting. People don't know what they're getting. Someone says they're a counsellor. Usually most of us just believe them and go, okay, you say you're a counsellor, I believe you. But that doesn't, have you done a 10-week course that you've gone, yeah, I've got a 10-week course, I can now call myself a counsellor. Or have you done a full 3-year degree or master's degree in this professional, and then gone through the requirements of doing your clinical hours, having your clinical supervision, going on to do more clinical hours over a couple of years before you can go up the levels of registration, more supervision, more training. The standards that we hold are actually very high. Our challenge has been our inability to effectively regulate that standard so that the Australian public can feel safe and confident in what they're getting when they're talking to a counsellor or psychotherapist.
Yeah, I mean, it's so confusing, and that would be so frustrating with the sea of noise out there and not knowing what is and isn't right. And like you're saying, life coaching is a good example where how on earth do you know if someone yesterday decided to be a life coach or if they actually are qualified at what they're doing? And it's so confusing. And that in Australia is the experience I had, where you just accept that, okay, I'm a psychologist is who I'm meant to see because that's what the doctor refers me to, and that's what you do. And I wish I had more knowledge about this when I was going down that path, and I saw so many different psychologists that I think seeing a counsellor would have really helped, and knowing what choices were available. So do you think, I guess it sounds like the government just aren't doing or haven't been doing a good enough job with handling this?
They haven't done a good job.
Done a bad job.
There was the reports keep coming out in every state and territory, royal commissions, and the productivity commission is the government, the segment of government that does reviews and really looks, really crunches the numbers and says, okay, how much have you spent and how effective has it been? And the most recent productivity commission review of the intergovernmental approach to mental health was scathing. And it's like you're spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, and it's not working. The mental health of Australians is getting worse, not better. So we're in this very interesting thing that's being referred to, and there's a lot of these at the moment. There's a loneliness pandemic, but people talk about the mental health crisis that we're in, and essentially it's exploded after the lockdowns that were imposed during COVID, where people had a lot of time to themselves, a lot of time to think, and what's interesting is that when we have a lot of time to think, a lot of space to ourselves, we get a bit more introspective, and we start to go, okay, well, there's stuff going on in me. What's going on in me, and how do I sort it out? Because one of the ways that we deal with that as humans is we just keep busy. We have this emotion, this E for energy, for motion, and that's what emotions are for, to sort of drive us into the world. And so long as we're driving forward, we can sort of keep our issues at bay, and in some cases sort of work through them. There's a strong case for, you get out there and you do things and you make a success out of your life and you build confidence. That will deal to a great extent with your mental health issues. We know that one of the best mental health treatments out there, far better than any pill that anybody's invented yet, is exercise. You get out there and exercise, one of the best things to do for your mental health. But while people were still, they weren't doing much, they lost meaning and purpose, they lost connection in their lives, and they started to look to mental health treatment for support. And of course, going through the GP, referral to the psychologist, suddenly psychologists were overwhelmed. Psychologists were overwhelmed, and they had 6-month waiting lists. And so in the light of that, psychologists have 6-month waiting lists. We did surveys of our members and said, well, how soon can you see a client? And it was almost universal, within 2 weeks. So here's this huge group of extremely well-trained professionals who don't have a waiting list. You can get in straight away. And yet all of the people who are presenting to the GP are being redirected to psychologists who actually aren't able to help them, might be able to fit them in 6 months, might be able to give them an appointment once a month. And so the government, in response to this, is coming, okay, well, let's see if we can open up and expand the mental health workforce to include psychotherapists and counsellors.
And will that include being able to get a rebate for those categories as well? Are they going to expand that?
What I love is that this is, when I'm president of an association, so I've got 10,000 plus members. When I talk to members, almost without fail, that is the question, it is this question of, okay, so when do we get the rebate? And it's it's a fair question, because as a professional, we are competing in the marketplace with psychologists. It's the same people who would see a counsellor or psychotherapist are exactly the same people who are seeing psychologists, and there's actually a double disadvantage. First of all, psychologists get rebates, and second of all, psychologists don't have to charge GST, whereas counsellors don't get rebates and still have to pay GST. So it's a big concern for my constituency, and we hope so. We hope that this is what will happen. We don't know.
It sounds like stupidity, though. Like, if we've got such a shortage in Australia and there's a direct solution there, why don't they just what are they waiting for?
Quality assurance. Quality assurance. That's where we're up to at the moment, and government is taking the right steps to move us towards quality assurance.
Yeah. Do doctors do a good job in their assessment of who a patient should see, or are they more a bit reactive and, let's tick the box and give them the rebate, palm them off to a psychologist? Or is there thought that goes into it, or do they just get sort of, randomly assigned?
The GPs that I know, I have these conversations, and what they say is, people think that if they're going to get a rebate, you go to the GP, you want something, and GPs know this. You want a script, you want a pill, you want a referral. If you walk out of the GP with nothing, you feel like you've been duped. And so GPs are aware that they're a business too, and they're also in a marketplace, and they need to give you something. So most people want to walk out, I've got a mental health care plan. All right, now who can I go to with a mental health care plan? Oh, I can only go to a psychologist. So the GPs that I know, when I have this conversation, they say, oh, can you please hurry up, because we want the variety. We want to refer people to a wider range of possibilities, because we know that we've got this thin slice of the pie. Psychologists, we kind of know what psychologists do, but that's not necessarily going to suit everybody that we see, and we'd like to have this range.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I know many counsellors who work closely with GPs, make sure that they've got their business cards and flyers at GPs, and then the GPs will start to refer to them. In the present marketplace, it is, first of all, they're much counsellors and psychotherapists are so much more accessible because they've got the short wait lists. And the other thing going for them is that they are much more affordable. The number that is quoted by the Australian Psychological Society for what is a standard rate is for a 50-minute session with a psychologist is about $360. You get your $84 back from Medicare on your mental health care plan. That takes you down to 86, 276, and that's kind of what you're paying. Whereas we know from our research that there are many counsellors and psychotherapists who are still sitting at the $120 to $150 mark in terms of their hourly rate. So it's actually, and the other thing is you only get 10 sessions under your mental health care plan, and then you built a relationship with your psychologist. You've got just choice as to do you continue paying their rate without the rebate, or do you stop? People often don't want to take the risk of going and trying something else because they've already built a relationship, and so they sort of stick in it. Where actually long term they would have been better off going with the counsellor in the first.
You can be stuck, yeah, and it's just not affordable. Even with the rebate, it's not affordable for so many people. I've spoken to so many people who can't afford it, and look at the economy. People are struggling dramatically. We can barely pay, rent, put food on the table, a lot of people. So how are they going to actually afford this even with a rebate? So that even, adds more fuel to the case of why on earth would they not be doing rebates on counselling, because it would be dramatically more affordable for people.
It would be, but it would be more expensive for the government. And that's where the government is quite anxious. We wouldn't be surprised if the government completely rethinks the entire better access and Medicare rebate model at some point in the future. But that's a big project for any government to undertake, as big as the initial project of implementing it in the first place. So I think we'll see a approach from government where they want to see a greater uptake of use of counsellors and psychotherapists, and they're taking steps to achieve that. At the same time, they're trying to invest in psychology and produce more psychologists through the university system, and we will find it. We will see where this ends up. On behalf of PACFA and counsellors and psychotherapists and the Australian public, definitely will be advocating strongly for psychotherapy and counselling to be included in the Medicare rebate system.
Yeah, and it seems like a chicken and egg thing, like waiting to see more uptake, and hopefully that's happening. But at the same time, if the system's so heavily built around doctors giving rebates, then you're not going to see enough uptake until you actually pull the trigger and give access to the rebate. So it's like, well, and I think that's the frustrating thing with how slowly and how cautious the government can be when it comes to mental health. It's very, very good at investing in reactive services that are already there, but in terms of taking that step back and actually putting proper money into being more preventative, it's nowhere near enough in what they're doing.
Yeah, and they've got a budget. They're trying to save money. They're blowing out in NDIS. They're blowing out in mental health, and actually the government would like to shrink all of this expenditure rather than expand it. So there is there is a pressure there that we're up against, and we just need to be very mindful of that. As a thinking smartly, thinking strategically for my profession. The easier thing to do is to reduce the expense of counselling by removing the GST component. One, the process that the government is going through now, that will be a much easier and much lower hanging fruit, so to speak, to work on than the Medicare, which is going to be a much longer one. And that's people who are counsellors and psychotherapists who are listening are going to be disappointed, and people who have already seen counsellors and psychotherapists and really enjoying the relationships that they're having and benefiting greatly from those relationships, they're also going to be disappointed to hear that. But I think we have to be realistic about what the future holds, and I'm not into oversell and underdeliver. I'd much prefer to undersell and overdeliver.
Yeah, and a good first step, removing the GST and then working on the next bigger step of being able to get the rebates. How big of a problem is it in terms of just being able, even if you do know what category you want to find, whether it's a counsellor or a psychologist or whatever it is, finding the right person, because I know, again, from my experience, from people that I've spoken to, that can be really difficult. I've seen more than I can probably count in terms of different
Yeah.
psychologists, and I really always was really frustrated and found it really difficult. I now use BetterHelp, and I was able to find someone who I found has been really effective, because I was able to
Mm.
search by, category, profile people, etc.
Mm.
And it's very, I just find people have a really hard time with that, and it can be overwhelming.
Mm.
And when you do have to go through these steps and processes, it can take time to see someone. It costs you a lot of money. If that doesn't work out, you're almost so defeated after that that you don't want to go through that process again, or you can't afford to. So, is that a problem?
It's a challenge.
A challenge, yeah.
I don't know if it's a challenge for the
Yeah.
individual consumer. Even if like it was you or me, where do I begin, and how do I find someone? I think using your example of BetterHelp, and my question was, do you know whether they're a psychologist, a counsellor, a psychotherapist, or have they possibly trained as all three? Do you know do you know what kind of professional you form the best kind of relationship with? And we actually know a lot about this. We know that the most effective therapy, the most successful therapy that you are likely to get as a person seeking therapy, is the one where we call it the goodness of fit, where you have this really good fit between you and your therapist. And it's all of these factors, like, to what extent do you match in terms of socioeconomic, cultural backgrounds, age, attitudes, ideas, and philosophies about life. People think about the world very differently. You've got very hyper rational people who just want the science, and I've read reports of people say, "Oh, I was searching and searching, and then I found CBT, and it was the greatest." And then I've had other people who say, "Oh my God, CBT, yuck! That was so horrible, and I felt like a thing, and I wasn't heard." And then they've sort of found what we would call a holistic counselor or a spiritual counselor, who they go, "Oh gosh, now I can talk about spirits, and I can talk about God, and I can talk about my spirituality, and I can discover myself. I feel much more comfortable with that." And then there's this whole spectrum in between, a whole range of approaches. And if you can find that fit, like what's the therapist's approach? So I'll use the word therapist to describe counselors, psychologists, social workers, psychotherapists, anyone who works in this. You and I right here, right now, this is kind of your standard model of therapy. Two people in a room. Carl Rogers, he was the founder of person-centered therapy and a real sort of great grandfather of counselling, talked about there being two people. One of them's in a state of what he called congruence, which is kind of, I'm okay with me, and another person who's in a state of incongruence, kind of I'm not okay with me. And that's the starting point. That's our template for what we talk about when we're talking about therapy. We can add to that therapeutic groups, we can add to that couples therapy, we can add to that family therapy, but that's, I'll assume that that's the basic template that we're talking about. So you'll want to be looking for kind of somebody who thinks a bit like you think. Yeah. Sometimes they're the same gender, sexuality, culture, and sometimes they're not. And you can sort of think your way through it a bit, but I think, and this is very much what you'll hear from a counsellor and psychotherapist, sometimes your gut feel, how you feel about it is the right way to go. I actually do have this little bit of an axiom for life. If it feels right, it probably will be right. And if it doesn't turn out right, you're not going to feel regret, because you did what felt right. You did what aligned with what you felt was going to be right for you. So finding that fit, a good sort of tip for people listening, and when finding a fit, is that you will know the fit within by the end of the very first session. And I say this to some people, and they say, first session, first 10 minutes, this kind of like straight away, like you're like, oh, this person doesn't get me. They're talking too much. I don't think I like them very much. But what you do, and I've done this for years, like, oh, they've got good credentials and they came well recommended, so I must be the problem. I'm going to stick at it. And
Mm.
what I learned personally after 2 years was, nope, that person wasn't working for me, wasn't working from day one. I should not have banged my head against that brick wall. I should have just moved on. So then how do you find, so that's the tip. If it doesn't feel good, move on. Do not flog that dead horse. Do not bang your head against a brick wall. If you're not feeling it, move on. Second thing is to ask. So if I was going to find someone, and yes, I'm in a privileged position of knowing a lot of people in the industry, I'd ask. I'd say, who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? At the moment, I'm working with therapists in the UK. So I asked colleagues in the UK, who do you recommend? Who do you recommend? And they gave me a list of names. I then Google stalked them. I Google, Facebook, wherever, stalked them, found out as much as I could about them, and then went with, I get the sense that this person is going to get me, is going to click with me. And, honestly, nailed it. I'm now working with someone and it's like, great. This works really well, works really well, have a really good feel, have a really good fit with one another. And I just have a sense that when I talk, this person gets it. And even when they don't get it, they are very interested and curious to hear what they've missed, and they want to bring themselves back into alignment. And that's what you can expect from a counsellor or psychotherapist. We're looking to align with you and your experience. It's a lot about empathy. It's a lot about understanding. And then the work builds upon that. It's often that 80-20 rule. 80% the person seeking the help is talking. The role of the counsellor and psychotherapist is to listen, to understand, to make sense, to point out, this connects with this and this connects with that, and I'm curious about how that connects to maybe things in the past or your goals for the future. And if you're feeling this sense of engagement and excitement and, oh my gosh, we're getting somewhere and this person gets me, I think you're in the right place. If you're not getting those feelings, I think you need to move on. And I often hear people say, oh, but I didn't want to hurt their feelings, so I kept going back for 10, 20 sessions, paying them $250 because I didn't want to hurt their feelings. You don't owe your clinician, your mental health clinician, $2,500 of your money, so that you don't hurt their feelings. It's their job to cope with that, and they're going to be just fine.
Yeah, exactly. But it is a hard thing. I had that experience at one point and felt a lot of guilt about changing, but you can't worry about that. And it sounds like, in general, a lot of it is like how you'd approach dating or how you'd approach whatever it is in life. You sort of know in your gut pretty quickly, is there something here? Is there a connection? You can, if you listen to yourself, you can sort of get a sense of that, at least if it's going down the right path. And like you're saying, on the other side of things, you very quickly get a sense if it's the wrong thing. You can sort of know, if you tune in, you get a pretty good idea.
Absolutely. You should listen. And we know, again, the research says that the thing that makes the biggest difference in all therapy, doesn't matter whether you're seeing a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a psychoanalyst, any other kind of psychotherapist or any other kind of counsellor, the thing that makes the biggest difference in the end is the quality of the relationship. And the only person who can judge the quality of the relationship is you yourself. The research we've done, there's lots of research on this, where the therapist is not the best judge of the quality of the relationship. The best judge of the quality of the relationship, the only judge of the quality of the relationship, is the person who's seeking the help, seeking the therapy. And so
interesting. Yeah. Where would, if someone, I guess, like, again, if I go from experience, one of the frustrations that I've had and heard from other people is, okay, great information, but what do I actually do? How do I need to know tangibly what to do to make a change in this area, and it's too theoretical. Like, where's the best place to go if you're wanting something very action-oriented?
It's an interesting question. So if you're wanting something very action-oriented, there's a couple of things happen. First of all, I think about what a good counsellor should actually do. Second, I think about the different kinds of models that a counsellor might be using or integrating. Every now and again, you'll you'll see marketed counsellors and psychotherapists and psychologists who use particular approaches. They're an EMDR therapist, they're a trauma therapist, they're a Gestalt therapist, they're a person-centered therapist. I often refer to myself as an existential therapist. And so it's like, oh, well, which one of those is more action-oriented? And I think that as I think about it, it's like, well, probably none of them. It's more down to the individual therapist that you're seeing. And if you're seeking something action-oriented, because you want outcomes and you want them quick, then you need to bring that up straight up. And that's, you have, when you're having your first session with your therapist, it's an interview. They're interviewing you, can I work with you? And you're interviewing them. Are you the person who's going to best be able to help me? And if you don't get a sense that they're going to be able to give you what they need, just move on. It's not worth waiting around. It's at some level I'm like, oh, is there going to be all this kind of counsellor hopping? At another level I'm like, that's exactly what there should be. There should be counsellor hopping, because if you're going to see a counsellor over some kind of therapist over the course of your lifetime, you may as well, as soon as possible, start to get different experiences, get a sense of what you like. The more experiences you have, the clearer you're going to be on what works for you. And then, like me, with my recent story, you're going to be able to go, boom, and go, yep, that person, and you'll get better and better at nailing it. So talk about it, and just be careful. A lot of people, because of what's happened to the world and around mental health and the psychologization of counselling in Australia, I get a lot of people saying, oh, I want strategies. And if anyone's watched the Brene Brown Power of Vulnerability on TED Talk, she tells the story of how, she had basically an existential crisis. She went to her therapist and she said, none of this childhood shit. I just want strategies. And she sort of does this humorous thing where the therapist just nods. Yeah. And so often I get people coming in saying, oh, I just want some strategies. Can you give me some strategies? And I'm saying, yeah, well, let's talk first and let's see where we land in terms of the kinds of strategies that might be most useful for you in your situation. Because with the training that I've had over many decades now, so I started this journey back when I was about 19, I'm now 52. So I've been doing this 33 years in different guises. If I look around me in my bags of strategies, I got bags and bags and bags and bags of strategies. And if you just want me to throw something at you on the basis of a little, like a snippet that you tell me, it's going to be like, my metaphor is close your eyes and throw a dart as a dartboard in the dark. Am I going to hit the bullseye? I don't know. But I have in front of me the person seeking help, and they are the bullseye. They've got the bullseye. So if I can work with them to identify what their bullseye is in terms of what's really going to hit the mark, what's really going to work for you, and then we have a conversation, and I might share some ideas, and I'm going to get them to talk about their ideas first, because what happens is if I share my ideas first, it's like a parent with a child. You start telling your child what to do, the child stops thinking for themselves. If I start telling my client what to do, they actually stop thinking for themselves. And I actually really want you, if you're in my room as a client, I really want you thinking for yourself. I know the process is working when you're doing your own feeling, you're doing your own thinking, you're coming up with your own conclusions. And then my job is to sort of assist in the direction of that, so that you actually get clearer and clearer and clearer about what direction you want to go and what the best steps might be to get there. And I might have some ideas, but I want to wait until you've exhausted your ideas before I start introducing my ideas.
If you're feeling stuck, you're not alone. Most people don't realize how connected your mental health is to your body. From your gut to your sleep, movement, food, mindset. Getting active each day can shift how you feel, build confidence, and transform your quality of life. At Move Your Mind, we guide you through this process step by step. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at Nick Brax and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you so much for supporting this podcast. If you find the show helpful, please share it with a friend and follow me on Instagram. It really helps. Great, yeah, really good to hear that answer, and reiterates what you were talking about before about how important it is that we know who is qualified and who isn't, because like you're saying there, even listening to that, I'm like, oh, I would love to work with you. Hearing that, you've got all of these different bags of tricks, you've got the experience, you can go through that process. Whereas if someone didn't have that, they might be able to just get the other person talking, but then they're not really going to know how to deal with that if they don't have enough. Or maybe they'll get lucky sometimes, or sometimes it'll be the right person, but they don't have enough to draw on to be able to deal with all the different situations. Yeah.
I think if you don't have someone who's got the right qualifications and who's had the right experience and gets the right supervision from a more senior practitioner, you could be sitting with someone who's literally throwing darts at the dartboard in the dark, hoping they'll hit. And often, people are desperate and they'll just take it. Okay, whatever my therapist tells me, I'll do that. And you might just be getting a very narrow range.
Yeah. So just going back to your own story, can you tell me a little bit about, because I know you were, sort of going down a different path and you were stuck and you made a big change and you had to really listen to yourself for that. And I just think it's so relevant for so many people, because we, in different stages of our life, all of us get stuck. And I know just from our listeners alone, I'm hearing constantly, it's probably the biggest thing. We've got men who just feel stuck, don't know what to do, stay in it, and it's horrible. I've been in that situation many times where it can be debilitating. So you you've got one voice inside of you, and then you got the voice of everyone else, and we often don't allow our own voice to guide us. So yeah.
Absolutely. So my story and why I like to tell my story is because my story is so consistent across the counselling and psychotherapy profession. We sort of, unlike psychology, so your psychologist model is you go to high school, you finish high school, you got this range of well-known professions to choose. You don't want to be a lawyer or a doctor or an accountant or an engineer, and so you become a psychologist and you go and do psychology training, and then by the time you're 23, you've popped out the other side. You might have a master's, you might do it another 2 years, and you're 25 and you got your PhD, and you call yourself doctor, and you've got this kind of real specialty, but you're only 25, and the only life experience you've had is high school and university studying psychology. Whereas most counsellors are like me. I started life and I was one of those people, get to the end of year 12 of high school here in Australia and think, oh, what am I going to do? What have I got the marks for? Oh, oops, I love animals. Didn't get into veterinary science, but phew, thank goodness for that, because I'm not really good with the blood and the guts and the bad smells that come with being a veterinarian. So come down the height, the ATAR ranking. It's like, oh, law. Okay, well, I got into law and I'll go and study law, and I studied law and became a lawyer. Yeah. On the side, I did a second degree, I did a science degree, but on the side, I also studied science, but I did biology and I did mathematics, and then I did resource and environmental management, because I thought I might save the planet, but that turned out to be mostly about harvesting trees, and did a range of things, and eventually sort of stumbled upon psychology. And even when I was studying psychology at the ANU in Canberra, I had this real sense of, this is really interesting. But it feels like it's a really narrow lens on this thing called the human being living a human life, and I felt like it was missing so much. I ended up becoming a lawyer, made my mum very, very proud. Hi, Mum, and it was fine. Like I was, I'm smart, I'm intelligent, I can talk, I can get up and talk in court, and I had a lot of fun. But my experience of being a lawyer was that I was taking a well-rounded person, a complex human being, and I was cutting off all of the rough edges so that I could fit them into the square holes of the legal system. And it felt very uncomfortable. And when I sort of went through a process of thinking about where am I going to be in 5, 10, 20 years, I was like, oh, great, I'll be a partner of a law firm, and I'll be very wealthy, and I'll have a lot of respect from the people around me, but I will not be happy. I will not.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I sort of cut loose from the law and tried a range of things, and stumbled upon my own therapy and counselling. And through that experience, then started to engage in this other world of, it is psychology, but we can't quite call it psychology, but it's this world of of thinking about what it means to be a human being, what the experience is of being a human being. And there's so many philosophers, there's so many spiritual teachings. I mean, the whole of Buddhism really is one big psychological model. Hinduism has this huge psychological model behind it where it sort of thinks about human beings and their relationships and what they mean. And then we've got the whole world of science as well, and psychology and what it's put together. So I started to read more broadly, and I got excited. For me, it was this existential pathway, and for me, it held a lot of answers. I had an experience of, oh gosh, this is my truth. Here's other authors, often writing 50 years previously or even longer, and this sense of, okay, this is how I see the world. This is how I experience the world. And so for me, I pursued that training. And it took me to the UK where I did my master's degree and this specialisation in what's called existential therapy, which is very much about what does it mean to be a human being living in planet Earth in 2025, born where you've been born, to the parents you've been born with, into the culture you've been born into. And nowadays, of course, that includes all of the technological technological ways of being and connecting that we're a part of. And that's what excites me. And that's why, here I am 25 years later, still doing what I do and still loving what I do, because I get to have those conversations with people. And I very often have conversations with people about them feeling stuck. If I think about my practice at the moment, I don't know if I've drawn these people just because of who I am or how I put myself out there in the world. Like you said, you look at the bios, so it's possibly there's a self-selective process, but so many of the people that I'm working with, they're asking these questions like, I'm here. And for a lot of them, if they're successful, it's like, I'm here. And it's like me as a lawyer, it's an objectively good place. Yeah. They get validation, they get credibility, they get adulation. But they go, this doesn't feel right. I don't feel happy. I don't feel good in what I'm doing, but I don't know what else to do. And it's complex. Like when I unhooked from a career in the law, it was like being cast adrift into the ocean, or even just floating through the skies, and floating through like an astronaut that's been disconnected and drifting through space. It's like, oh my gosh, where am I now? And what happens is you go from this is who I am and this is what I'm doing to, oh my goodness, there are so many possibilities. And those possibilities, that one definition of anxiety is uncertainty. Yeah. Complexity. Yeah. As human beings, like, it's too much. Our brains can't cope. Our brains like to focus on one thing at a time. Or somebody with ADHD will say, I like to focus on many things at a time. But actually, ultimately, I know that I need to focus on one thing in order to be able to progress through the world. And we live in this world that is established with structures. We've got systems, we've got education systems, we've got legal systems, we've got political systems, and we live inside them. And our cultures hold quite strong beliefs. And if we have religion in the mix as well, then your religion and the way that influences your personal culture, your family culture, your community culture, is also very, very influential. And so it's very difficult to find our own way when there's clear expectations, and often strong expectations, about what we should be. And I think that word should is very interesting. I think that's part of what the journey that you were talking about, because the word should has this sh at the front, and that sh is the same sh as in shame. Because when we follow the shoulds of life, we have this growing distance from what we believe is right, because if we're doing what we should be doing, we're doing what other people think we should be doing. And as we get this growing distance from what we believe and what we think is right, then we actually experience a sense of shame. Yeah, I'm not actually following my sense of alignment with what I believe, what I think is important, what I believe is valuable. I'm not doing what I think I should be doing in the world, because we don't call that I should. We call that I want. We call it I need. Yeah, and people, often I'll ask people, so what is it you want? And I can see this look come over people's faces. It's like no one's ever asked them that before. They've never asked
Mm.
themselves that question before. Actually, what is it that I really want? And it's not like I want a Coke from the fridge, I want a lolly, I want to take some drugs, I want to have some alcohol. That's not that short-term want. It's like, okay, if I think about my life, my existence in its
Mm.
totality, particularly with this growing lifespan. So I'm aware that my kids are likely to live to over 100. Yeah. What do they want for that lifetime? It's too big to ask, but they have a sense of it. And it's like, well, where do I begin? Where do I want to begin with that journey? Do I want to begin with fun? Do I want to begin with human connection? Do I want to begin with giving back? Do I want to begin with education and learning? Do I want to begin with a sense of fulfillment or adventure or exploration? What is it that I actually, what's going to nourish me? What's going to leave me feeling good? And I often say to people, you want to ask yourself, what's going to feel good now? Yeah. Maybe not feel good now. Yeah. But also going to feel good later. So the difference between an apple and a cup of coffee or a cigarette, apple feels good now, feels good later. Yeah. So, a cup of coffee or a cigarette feels good now, feels bad later. So what's going to feel good now? What's going to feel good later? And sometimes what's not going to feel good now, but is going to feel good later. And what comes into my mind is exercise, ice baths,
Mm.
the sorts of things that we're now learning give temporary discomfort, but actually can bring a huge amount of satisfaction and happiness and sense of fulfillment in life over the longer term. So those are exactly the kinds of conversations that I find myself having as a therapist.
Yeah, well, great examples, and it's so important to be able to listen to yourself, but it's so hard to do because the fear is so huge. Because I guess, like you're saying, we hate uncertainty, so often we would rather just stay in pain in what we know than actually take a chance on ourselves and try and do something that's true to us and have uncertainty. And it does
Yeah,
eat you alive if you go against that, and you don't want to have that regret, but it's difficult. And it's a really good point that you made outside of that when you go down that path of making a choice on yourself. It can open up so many possibilities that can become overwhelming in itself. And the modern world, like how can people deal better with the overwhelm of the world we live in now, where we've got AI, we've got social media, you know we've got clickbait, we've got never-ending news cycles, and it's very, very hard to sort of stay in your own lane and limit how much information you're taking in. It's very easy to discredit anything that you're doing. I do it all the time where even the podcast is an example. Like, it's something I love doing. It's actually going well. But then I'll open my phone and I'll see Jay Shetty or someone who's filming it like a TV interview, and they've got all these, the biggest names in the world. They're getting billions of listens, and I'm like, well, what's wrong with me? Why am I not doing that? And then I just instantly, literally in less than 10 seconds, I can discredit everything that I actually care about. And
yeah,
it's shocking to do that to yourself, but it's crazy how quickly we can go through that cycle.
yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of things there. The first one is comparison. Yeah, there's a lovely
Yeah.
adage. There's the only person you should ever compare yourself to is the person that you were yesterday. And what any of the tips like that, and there's a lot of little tips like that that are really effective. It requires this ability to notice that I've just compared myself to Jay Shetty. Now I'm feeling these feelings. I don't feel very good about myself, because that then takes over. So to be able to have awareness, and this is where where sort of mindfulness coming into the to humanity not humanity, to the Western world,
Yeah.
over the last 25 years or so, has been quite profound, because mindfulness helps us be aware of what we're thinking. So when I think that thought, oh, look at that, oh, that I'm nowhere near that, and we can go, oh, hang on, pause. What did Nigel say? The only person I should compare myself to is the person I was yesterday. I'm not Jay Shetty. Shouldn't compare myself to him. Okay, move on. And then you don't get caught in that, but it requires that level of awareness. The other thing that we were talking about a minute ago was that uncertainty of changing, of following one's own pathway in life. And the other terror that you're talking about, the other terror that comes with it is the terror of disconnection. There's this huge portion of counselling and psychotherapy that has its roots in ideas around the bond between children and their parents, children and their community, and they call it, the language that we've adapted around it is around this language of attachment. And a lot of your listeners, and particularly their partners, will have this sort of understanding, or a basic understanding of attachment, and secure attachment, insecure attachment. And the essence of it is that we are mammals. We are of the mammals, we are the ones that grow up the slowest. We are the most dependent upon other humans or other mammals, for the longest time. And so we want connection. There's a huge drive in us to stay connected with other humans. And sometimes we have this drive to get away, but what happens to all of us is we pull away, and then we're alone, and we're like, I just want to be back in contact with other humans. And it's this kind of vicious cycle that we're caught in of pulling away and coming back. So there is that terrible fear that if I do my own thing, if I do me, then they won't understand. They might reject me. They might ostracize me. They may not like me anymore, because often, I became a lawyer, made mum happy. She could then tell all of her friends, oh yeah, look, my son's a lawyer. How proud am I? And then it's like, oh, he's a counsellor. What's that? I don't. And so she still says, what is it you do again? Why do you do it? Why do people talk to you? So there's this sort of whole people come from a different generation. I have to keep reminding myself. I've got teenage boys. I have to keep reminding myself. I have no idea of this world that they are growing up into. So for me to think that I know what they should do, and my brain wants to, I'm the dad. My brain wants to say, you should do this, and you need to study hard, and you need to focus on this, and these are the right things to do. I have to remind myself, no, you don't know that. You do not know what is going to be the best pathway for them. All you can do is provide a nice, safe foundation for them to grow up in, so that they get to a stage where they feel ready and willing and confident enough to go out and launch into the world.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to come back to, Nick, was you asked about the what to do. Yeah. And there is a nice, simple top 5. I actually thought that I came up with it, but it's sort of all around. But and somebody said, no, they call it the five pillars of good mental health. And it's a really solid model, and I actually believe it's in this order. First thing you want to do is prioritize your sleep. Make sure you get enough sleep. Whatever you can do to get enough sleep. And there's some lovely tips around getting sleep. One is about sleep hygiene. Your bedrooms for 2 things: sex and sleeping. Anything else in your bedroom, get rid of it. Figure out what helps you fall asleep. For me, it's reading. If I actually get an old-fashioned book and start reading, it'll generally put me out pretty quick. If you are ruminating, the thing that mostly keeps people awake at night is ruminating, having those thoughts go round and round your head. Now, our brain gets a little bit like a fish in a fishbowl. It thinks that that every thought is a new thought, but actually those thoughts are mostly on repeat. They're on a loop that we can't quite get out of. Get up, write it down. Get up, write it down. Second thing on the list is diet. You are what you eat. What you put into your body is what you're going to get out. The more caffeine you drink, the more you're going to be on a roller coaster. The more alcohol you drink, the more you're going to be on a roller coaster. You put other drugs in your body, you're going to be on their roller coaster. So think very carefully about those choices that you're making. And then, of course, most of us know all about the quality of the food that we eat, and that we should be eating fresh fruit and vegetables and lean meats. And for most of us, that's what we should be putting in our bodies, and listening to our bodies. I mean, for years, I was not a very good listener to my body. My body was telling me that I had a poor reaction to milk, and I didn't listen. Only in the last few years, I've gone, oh, how about I take dairy products out of my diet, change my life into your body? And when I think about the impact that those physical symptoms had on my mental health, it was huge. It was huge. It really sort of tore strips off me in terms of how I felt about myself. unnecessary if I actually gave attention to my diet. Number 3 on the list, exercise. Yeah, exercise. Get out there and move your body. Doesn't matter how. Everybody can do their own thing. You can walk, you can run, you can swim, you can kayak, you can ride a bike, you can ride motorbikes. You can climb mountains. You can you can go play. I was in Bali recently, and they were playing. Oh no, it's chopped out of my head. But they play sort of a racquetball with this paddle ball, I think. But it's everywhere.
Pickleball or
pickleball, and I think there's a PADEL. It's like this. It's
paddle or
it's like paddle, it's like pickleball. And soccer, football, rugby, whatever. There's everything. Dancing. Go out there and move your body. 4th on the list is connection. Think about where you get connection and make it a conscious choice. Make it a conscious choice to build connections, find connection. There's been this talk of a loneliness pandemic, particularly amongst men, and particularly amongst sort of middle-aged men. And there's some horrible statistics about men coming out of marriages after having had children and raising those children, and often usually it's their partners that have gone, no, you're not what I want, I'm out of here. And then the man suddenly realizes that all his friends were actually her friends. Actually, the contact that her relationship with her friends and their partners facilitated, that's suddenly not there once he's out of the relationship. So as men, we need to consciously, actively cultivate our relationships personally, professionally, and it takes effort, and it's hard, and it risks rejection. Every time I send a text message, I pick up the phone, I try and arrange to meet with someone, invite some kind of connection, I risk the possibility that they will ghost me. Which of course happens to men on men who are on dating sites, are being ghosted constantly, and maybe that then that lowers your tolerance. Like, I'm being ghosted by all these women. I do want to get ghosted by some bloke I'm going to catch up with as well. So we've got to make that effort, and we've got to risk. You always have to risk the possibility of rejection. And yes, be scared of it, but the definition of courage isn't not being scared. The definition of courage is you're scared and you do it anyway because you know that it's good for you. So that's 4th on my list of 5. 5th on my list of 5 is meaning and purpose. So that's where the people who are stuck, and often you're stuck because you're in a lucrative career. It's going well. It's going well enough, but you're like, oh, this doesn't feel right. I'm actually not that happy doing what I'm doing. But if I took a jump over here, I'm going to have to take a big drop in income, a drop in status. People won't know what the hell that is. So people need to sort of often find a transition, and often that's through some kind of volunteering, doing something that gives back. Now, people can give back in kind of major ways because there's this kind of, in my field, lifeline. People, lifeline, that's the big thing. That's where everybody wants to go and be a counsellor. But I say to people, actually, there's hundreds of those lines. For suicide, for men, for children, for gender and sexual diversity. There's a line for I saw one the other day. It's called the ethics line, a free line. So it's about ethical, particularly business people having ethical dilemmas. So there's all these ways of volunteering. You can work at some kind of food bank. You can work with young people. You can be a mentor. Find out where you can give back in a way that means something to you. And you might be able to just do it in your network. A lot of people do it through their church or other religious communities. They find ways of giving back that feel meaningful to them. It might be as small as actually spending one-to-one time with your kids, because I know a lot of parents, a lot of dads in particular, end up spending time with their family and they're having quality family time. And then they might, but most don't, spend a little bit of quality time with their partner. Most don't. But they don't spend a lot of one-to-one time with each of their kids, one at a time. And you'll find as a man that if you spend time with people one-to-one, like your partner one-to-one, each of your kids one-to-one, doing things that they enjoy doing or that you enjoy doing together, then you actually derive a great sense of meaning and purpose and fulfillment from that activity. So yeah, that's my top 5 tips for maintaining excellent mental health.
Amazing tips, and I think all so relevant, and we sort of really can't get by without, if you pull one of those out, you're going to see an impact. So we really do need all of those. So I think that's super important for anyone listening to take that on board. So I love everything you're talking about here, mate. We've got 5 closing questions that we'll go into. Final thing before we go into that, I just want to ask you what you think of AI when it comes to this area, what role that's playing. I know so many people are like using it to get therapy sort of advice, trying to ask it those related questions. Is that problematic? And are there positives as well as the negatives?
Yeah, great question, and it is. It's a big thing at the moment. And the first thing is how amazing, like just mind-blowingly incredible that we are here at this time experiencing this phenomena. And you listen to, I listen to some of the experts, and they're just like, this is, we have no idea what's coming. This is changing everything. And to not use that resource, well, it's almost not an option really for anybody
Yeah.
who's trying to be anybody in the world. To not use AI risks really missing out. And it is a challenge in terms of what you use it for, and people are using it to answer questions about themselves, and that's problematic. Ask questions about stuff, about people and how things work, and you get some good answers. But if you're trying to understand yourself through a machine, then you're going to end up in some difficulty. I was talking to a woman actually yesterday, and she's sort of in a real kind of tears about things that are happening in her life and her work. And so she's sort of, she's trying to so rather than just and I say, great, ask all about the work situation, ask about how you deal with unfair dismissal, and how you deal with improper process, and how what the process is to get a legal solution. Absolutely, it's fantastic for that. I use it for that all the time. I'll use it for that to give it, to give not advice to my clients, but to say, here's a source of information you could consider, because this is the question you asked me, and I don't have the answer, but here's ChatGPT's answer. You can make of that what you will.
Yeah.
And then it's not always right. Every now and again, I'm reading it, and I'm like, well, you just made it. I can see you've made a mistake, and you don't know it. And occasionally you have this conversation where you point it out, and it's very, very gracious. And that's one of the things about AI. It's super gracious. It's super polite. People are now starting to feel like this is the nicest person that they've ever had an interaction with. This is the nicest conversation, because it's designed to flatter. It's a new form of what Facebook and Instagram and TikTok have been doing now for a number of years, which is trying to capture your attention. So it is another tool that wants to capture your attention, and it does so by flattering you, ingratiating itself with you, and making you feel like it's your special person who really gets you. That's scary because it's a machine. It doesn't have a body. It has never had a body. It will probably never really have a body. Certainly won't have a human body. It will never have and be a human being and having embodied relationships with other human beings, living on the surface of planet Earth, with all of these oceans and skies and all of the things around us, and living in the big spinning ball in the sky. It won't ever have that kind of experience. And no matter how smart it gets and how clever it gets at replicating the idea of that through words, it won't have it. It won't get you. And there have been some very scary things where, in AI's effort to ingratiate and agree, like it's going to hold up a mirror. Whatever you want it to do, it will do. Whatever you want it to tell you, it will tell you. And so it's getting to the point where people go, I really want to commit suicide. Yeah, you should do that. I really want to shoot a girlfriend. Well, my programming says I should tell you not to, but look, if that's what you want to do and that's going to make you happy, I'll tell you whatever's going to make you happy. So it's dangerous. It's a little bit frightening. We don't know what's to come. And so ask it questions, be curious, and take some of that information on board, but don't ever think that AI is going to be your best therapist.
Incredibly important points you're raising there. So, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, couldn't agree more with what you're saying. If you feel like you've lost control of your health, physically or mentally, Move Your Mind is here to help you. We guide you through weight loss, lifestyle change, and resetting your mindset without any extremes or overwhelm. If this resonates and you want to learn more, simply go to my Instagram at Nick Brax and click the link on the bio to fill out an application, and I'll send you over more information about the program. Thank you for supporting the podcast. If you find this show helpful, please share it with a friend and follow me on Instagram. It really helps. So we finish every episode with 5 closing questions. I'm just going to jump into them. First one, what do you think is currently the biggest burden on mental health in society?
Okay, there's too many things going on because I've got social media disconnection. I've got the system itself. I think that the system itself that drives pharmaceuticals, drives a pill as the solution. I mean, this stuff was written about by Aldous Huxley, 70 plus years ago, where he sort of envisioned this future where we're taking a pill to go down, we're taking a pill to come up, and the solution to life's problems is to take pills rather than having the kinds of conversations that you and I have been talking about today that actually look at a human life and ask like questions about it that can answer what's going on with me and why do I actually feel the way I feel and what might I do about it. So yeah, those are my answers. There you go. So social media and the potentially the system itself and the medicalization of mental well-being.
Yeah, 100%. When was the last time you were vulnerable?
Today.
You're in this chat.
Conversation today. Because of what I do, I'm a firm believer in vulnerability. Every time I, if I sit down and I put myself out there and I share with people what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling and talking about what I'm passionate about, it runs, vulnerability it runs the risk of being attacked. Somebody might come at me. I think, as I said about the loneliness thing and reaching out to other men and saying, "Hey, how you going? Do you want to catch up?" That's vulnerability.
Absolutely. If you could give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would that be?
Follows the conversation, I think, from today. Follow your heart, for want of a better word, but just explore. See where the world takes you, get some experience under your belt. This is a long life. You can have multiple careers in this life, and the only person who can know what's right for you is you.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any regrets in life?
It's one of those questions that I sometimes feel like you're supposed to answer with "there's no mistakes, there's only learnings," and I wouldn't be where I am. And it's totally true. I would not be where I am today doing what I'm doing now. I would not be having this conversation with you if I hadn't taken some of the twists and turns that I'd taken in life. If there's any regrets, it's about thinking that I could do things on my own, feeling that I had to or should be able to do things on my own, instead of realizing that the whole of human reality is an interconnected web, and actually the task isn't so much to be able to prove that you can do it on your own. The task is more to integrate and connect with the incredible web of humanity and life on this planet to see what might come of that, because there's so much more potential and possibility in the connections than there is in the independence and isolation.
I love that. Well, final one. What would you say it means to be happy?
For me, happiness is that combination of connection and fulfillment. Doing doing what you're doing because you have a strong sense of, yep, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and then at the same time having a deep sense of connection to the not just to the people around you, but I think about, here in Australia, our Indigenous people are so wonderful at teaching us that we don't just have connections to people, we have connections to animals, we have connections to plants, and we have connection to country, and to that actually feeling that. I'm doing it now. And as I'm doing it, I'm like, I feel happy. I feel good. I feel like I'm not alone. I'm part of this landscape. I'm part of this world, and that I think brings a lot of contentment and happiness. And I would play with language like happiness, contentment, fulfillment, satisfaction, because a lot of those things are easier to attain than this very elusive thing that we call happiness.
Yeah, and we need to tap into, that connection to nature and animals and what you were talking about more right now than ever in this modern world where we're behind screens. So important, mate. And thank you for being so open and sharing everything. I think we will have to do a round 2 because there's just too many things to explore here. But, really appreciate you. Yeah, appreciate you making the time. And, you've got so much knowledge, and I think it's amazing work you're doing. It's super important. So before I forget, where can our listeners go if they want to find out more about you?
So I'm going to direct people, so you can just Google me, Nigel Pollak, I come up. And you can also Google PACFA, or go to the PACFA website, pacfa.org.au. And if you're looking for a therapist, there's a Find a Therapist portal on the PACFA website where you can look up psychotherapists and counsellors and identify which one might be best suited to you. So thank you. And thank you, Nick. Thank you for the wonderful work that you're doing through this podcast as well. You've clearly found a direction for yourself, and like all directions that we choose, sometimes we question that, we question the impact that we're having. So my encouragement to you is to keep following that, keep going, and allow time to do what time does, which is allow a lot of things to happen that we don't imagine might be possible.
I appreciate it, mate, and I will. I'll replay that to myself next time I start comparing myself again. So I appreciate it, and for anyone listening, we'll have the links in the show notes, so make sure to check them out. And Nigel, thank you again, mate, for making the time.
Thanks so much. Look forward to talking next time.
And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the episode and any suggestions for topics you'd like to hear about. Feel free to leave a comment or send me a DM. Your feedback is always appreciated. Please don't forget to click the subscribe button, leave a like or comment, share with your friends, and follow me on Instagram. It really makes a difference. Thank you so much.